Before we step into Greywick House, I ask you one thing. Support this journey into the fog. Press like, subscribe, and share this tale, because once we begin, there may be no way back. Let us enter the house beyond the fog. The letter arrived on a Tuesday, folded twice and slipped beneath my apartment door without a stamp, without a seal, without even my name. I found it when I came home from work, its edges curled, the paper smelling faintly of salt and smoke. At first I thought it was a prank. Something slipped in by the neighbor's kids. But when I unfolded it, my hands trembled. The handwriting was neat, old-fashioned, the kind of script you only saw in diaries or family Bibles. You are expected at Greywick House, upon the cliff beyond Raven's Hollow Bay. Arrive before midnight, All Hallows Eve. The doors will be open. No signature, no address but the one that already lived in my memory. Greywick House. It had been 20 years since I'd last seen that house, 20 years since my mother had taken my hand and pulled me down that same cliff road in the rain, whispering never to look back. I had not spoken of it to anyone, not to friends, not to lovers. Greywick House was a word I buried, a bruise I learned not to touch, and yet here it was, waiting for me in black ink, as if no years had passed at all. I left the letter on the kitchen table and paced the apartment like a man circling a cage. The words burned in my head. You are expected. It didn't say invited. It didn't say welcome. It was expectation, like a duty long overdue. I tried to laugh it off. Who would even know me well enough to send this? My family was gone, scattered to graves and silence. Friends had never heard of Raven's Hollow Bay, let alone Greywick House. No one should know, and yet someone did. I poured a drink, left it untouched. My phone buzzed with the usual nonsense emails, reminders, a grocery app I hadn't deleted. None of it seemed real against the weight of the letter. At midnight, I tried to sleep. I dreamed of a door opening into fog, of voices just beyond hearing, of a bell that struck. Not 12, but 30. When I woke, the letter lay on the nightstand, though I swore I'd left it in the kitchen. By morning, the decision was already made. Not chosen, made. Some things tug at you until resisting feels like drowning. I booked a train to the coast. The ride was 6 hours through gray towns and fields, beaten flat by autumn wind. No one sat near me. My reflection in the window looked pale, thinner than I remembered, as if the letter had already begun feeding on me. By the time I reached Raven's Hollow, the sky had thickened into iron. The station was little more than a platform of cracked boards. The ticket office closed, its windows dusty. A single cab waited at the curb, the driver smoking with a look that said he'd been waiting for no one and everyone at once. "Greywick House," I said, sliding into the back seat. He flicked ash out the window. "You sure?" "No," I admitted. He didn't smile. He just started the engine and drove. The road wound along the bay, cliffs rising on one side, sea gnawing the rocks on the other. Fog rolled in sheets, sometimes thick enough to erase the headlights, sometimes thin enough to reveal black water tossing far below. I remembered this road. I remembered my mother's hand pulling me faster, her breath harsh, her eyes never leaving the looming silhouette of Greywick. We had run in rain that night, shoes slipping, her voice shaking as she said, "Don't look back, Elias. Don't ever look back." And yet here I was, looking back, going back. The cab slowed as the house came into view. Greywick House stood at the cliff's edge, vast and crooked, its windows blind, its roof spined with chimneys like a beast's broken teeth. Vines crawled its walls, black with age. "The gates hung open." "Won't go closer," the driver said. "That's fine." My voice was thin. I stepped out. The fog swallowed the sound of the cab pulling away. Alone, I faced the house that had waited 20 years for me. And the door, true to the letter, was open. The front steps sagged under my weight, was swollen with damp. Nails rusted to dust. I pushed the door wider, though it seemed already prepared to accept me. Hinges groaned like an old throat clearing. Inside smelled of mildew, smoke, and something faintly metallically iron left in the rain. Dust lay heavy on the floorboards, but here and there, tracks had been cleared, as if someone had walked recently. Careful but undeniable, the hall stretched long and narrow, paneled in oak gone dark with age. Portraits lined the wall-stern men, pale women, faces that seemed ready to shift if I stared too long. Each wore the same strange brooch, a circle with a line through it, like a crossed-out moon. On a table near the door lay a brass key, tarnished green. Beside it, another note, the same neat handwriting. "Your room is prepared. The West Wing. Do not wander before midnight." I lifted the key, cold as ice, and felt a tremor in my chest. Whoever wrote these notes knew me, expected me, commanded me, and I liked. The West Wing corridor tilted as if the house itself leaned toward the cliff, wallpaper peeled in long strips, curling like tongues. My footsteps echoed louder than they should have, as if the space wanted me to hear myself. Room 6 stood at the end, its door closed but not locked. The key slid into easily, as if it had known its home all along. The room was simple. A bed draped in white cloth, a fireplace of cold stone, curtains drawn across a tall window that rattled faintly with wind. On the dresser lay a pitcher of water, clear and fresh, though no one had lived here for decades. And on the pillow another ribbon, black frayed, tied in a figure-8 knot. My breath caught. I touched it, half expecting it to move. It lay limp, but warm, as if held recently in someone's hand. I sat on the bed, clutching the ribbon. Memory stood half dream, half nightmare. A night of thunder, a child's voice crying in the halls, my mother pulling me down the stairs, shouting words I can't remember. The front door slamming shut behind us, rain swallowing everything. The ribbon slipped from my hand and fell to the floor. When I bent to pick it up, I saw something carved into the underside of the bed frame. Welcome back. The letters were shallow but sharp, as if made yesterday. My heart pounded. I stumbled to the window, yanked the curtain. Outside, the fog pressed thick against the glass, moving like breath. For a moment, I thought I saw shapes in it, figures walking, heads bent, silent as procession. Then the window pane shivered, as if something outside had leaned close and whispered. I dropped the curtain and backed away. On the fireplace mantel sat a clock, its hands frozen at 12. I stared at it too long, waiting for the tick that never came. And then, soft, so soft, I almost missed it, came a chime. Not the clock, not any clock. I knew. One. Far away, muffled by stone and fog. 4, 5, 6. The sound vibrated the water in the pitcher. 7, 8. The ribbon on the floor twisted slightly, as if stirred by air. 10, 11, 12. Silence. And then a 13th. The 13th chime echoed through the bones of the house. Not loud, not metallic breath, drawn thin and deliberate, as if the walls themselves exhaled. I froze, every muscle locked, my pulse beat in my throat, in my ears, in the hollow of my teeth. I had heard it before, in dreams, in whispers, half remembered from childhood. The sound that sent my mother fleeing this place. The sound no clock should ever make. The ribbon twitched again. This time it tightened into a knot by itself, pulling into the figure-8 shape with a slow, almost human patience. The fireplace coughed ash. The portraits in the hall groaned faintly, wood frames shifting as if settling. I stood there in the silent room, terrified to breathe too loudly. And then came a knock. 3 raps on the door. Slow, measured, waiting. I backed toward the window, heart slamming. Who's there? My voice sounded too small, swallowed by the curtains, by the fog pressing beyond the glass. No answer. Just another knock. I forced myself forward, hand shaking as I reached for the handle. The key still hung in the lock. I turned it, The sound was deafening in the hush. I pulled the door open a fraction. The hallway lay empty. Shadows pooled along the walls, deeper than they should have been. The portraits now stared directly at me, every painted eye wide and white, their mouths seeming to curve with the hint of a smile. At the floor outside my door lay another note. Do not close the door tonight. Midnight is waiting. The paper was wet, as though just pulled from fog. I slammed the door shut. My hands shook too badly to turn the lock again. The note slid under the door by itself, rustling as it came to rest at my feet. I left it there, on the mantel. The clock ticked once, though its hands had not moved. In the silence that followed, I realized the house was breathing with me. Every inhale I drew, the walls seemed to echo. Every exhale, the floorboards shivered. I sat on the bed, clutching the ribbon, staring at the door. I was not too close. My phone in my pocket buzzed, suddenly, though I had no signal. The screen lit. A message from a number I did not know. It said only, "Welcome to Greywick. The house remembers." The morning came gray, as though the house had wrung the color from the sky. When I opened my eyes, the ribbon still lay coiled on the nightstand like a waiting snake. The note remained where I had dropped it, damp edges curling. I hadn't slept much. The 13th chime replayed in my mind, looping through my skull until I wasn't sure whether I had dreamed it or remembered it. Every time I drifted, the sound dragged me back. I rose stiffly, washed my face in the cold water from the pitcher, and pulled back the curtains. The fog pressed against the window pane like a living thing. I couldn't see the cliff edge, nor the sea, just gray upon gray, swirling and breathing as if the world outside were another lung. From somewhere within that fog, a sound rose a low hum, like a choir rehearsing scales beneath the earth. I closed the curtains quickly. The hallway was colder than my room. My footsteps echoed as I walked. Though I tried to tread lightly, the portraits still hung on the walls, but some were not the same as the night before. I stopped short before one. A boy with hollow eyes, his ribbon tied in the figure-8 knot. Had that portrait been there yesterday? I would have sworn no. I hurried on. At the bottom of the stairs, the main hall stretched before me. The door still stood open to fog, just as the letter had promised, but there were others now. Shapes moved in the mist just beyond the threshold, slowly, deliberate. As I stepped closer, I realized they were people, or seemed to be. Their outlines wavered in the vapor, men and women in coats too long out of style, children clutching books or ribbons. None spoke, none looked at me, and then, one by one, they stepped inside. The house accepted them without hesitation. The fog clung to their clothes, their hair, their skin. They left no wet footprints, though their shoes shone damp. A woman with hollow cheeks passed me without a glance. Her eyes were gray stone, her lips cracked, as though she had been pulled from the fog rather than walked out of it. A man followed, tall, gaunt, his coat brushing the floor. He carried a candle that did not burn, only glowed faintly, its light more memory than flame. Then a child, her ribbon black, tied the same way as mine, walked past, clutching a book to her chest. She looked up at me once. Her mouth opened, but no sound came. Only a breath, faint and cold, slipped into the hole with her. The procession continued until the hall was crowded. They did not speak to one another. They did not touch. Each seemed wrapped in their own silence, yet bound by some unseen thread. Finally, the last figure entered. He was shorter than the rest, shoulders hunched, hair white. His face I almost knew. He looked at me directly, and his eyes were sharp as glass. "You came back," he said. His voice was dry, papery, like old pages turned too fast. Yes," I stammered. He nodded once, as though checking a list. "The house remembers, and now it will not let you leave." Before I could answer, the fog closed behind him, sealing the door with a soft sigh. The hall fell silent. Every figure turned toward the staircase together, like dancers waiting for a cue. Then, without a word, they ascended slow, steady, endless. I was left standing by the door, my breath clouding in the cold air. The words still in my ears. "The house remembers, and now it will not let you leave." I followed the strangers up the staircase, though my body begged me to turn away. The steps creaked under my weight, but not under theirs. They moved like shadows wearing flesh. At the landing, the procession split, some drifting down the east corridor, others vanishing toward the west. Their movements were deliberate, almost rehearsed, as though each knew exactly where they belonged. Only the old man lingered. He stood at the center of the landing, waiting, his head tilted toward me. His eyes were pale and sharp, but not unkind. "You shouldn't have answered," he said. "I didn't," I whispered. He smiled faintly. "Coming here was answer enough." Then he turned and shuffled toward a door I had never noticed before, a tall frame with iron hinges set flush into the wall, as if it had been part of the house all along. He opened it without a key, stepped inside, and was gone. The door closed itself with a whisper. Alone, I explored the landing. The air smelled faintly of candle wax and damp earth. I pressed my hand to the wall where the hidden door had been. Cold stone met my palm. No seam, no sign it had ever existed. I moved down the east corridor. The portraits here were different children. Mostly. Some smiled, but their smiles never reached their eyes. Each held something in their hands. A ribbon, a book, a candle. A few had mouths open mid-song, though no sound escaped the canvas. Halfway down, I stopped. One portrait was of me. The face was thinner, the hair darker, the eyes sunken, but it was mine. Unmistakable. The figure in the painting wore a ribbon around his wrist, black and knotted, and his lips parted in a silent whisper. My stomach lurched. I staggered back until my shoulders struck the opposite wall. The portrait remained fixed, impassive, patient. "Why?" I breathed. The house did not answer. I turned a corner and found myself at a tall window. The fog outside pressed against the glass, thicker than before. This close, it swirled in patterned loops and curves, almost like script. I wiped the condensation with my sleeve and squinted. Yes, letters, words, written in fog itself. Stay. The word smeared as though a hand had dragged through it, and another formed beneath. Choir. I stumbled back, breath catching in my throat. The window pane shuddered as though struck from outside. A pale outline pressed against the glass small, no higher than my chest. A child's palm, leaving a wet imprint. Then another beside it, and another. 3 hands, 5, 7, until the whole window seemed covered in prints. I ran. Back at the landing, the hall was empty. No strangers, no procession, only silence. I forced myself toward the west corridored away. The note had told me not to wander. The air grew colder with each step, the boards softer, as though rotting beneath the carpet. At the end stood a door of heavy oak. A ribbon hung from the knob, black and frayed, tied in the same figurate. I reached for it, despite every nerve in my body screaming not to. The ribbon twitched, the knob turned on its own, and the door creaked open to darkness that seemed far deeper than the house could contain. From within came the faintest sound, a breath drawn in unison with mine. The darkness beyond the door was thicker than any night I had ever known. It did not recede before me. It clung, sticky and absolute. The faint glow from the corridor died the instant I stepped across the threshold, as though swallowed whole. The smell hit me first, damp stone, mold, and something sharper, metallic, like blood rubbed between coins. My hand brushed the wall, searching for a switch, a candle, anything. Instead, my fingers found grooves, carvings, letters gouged deep into the wood. I leaned close, straining to read. N-A-M-E-S. The words stretched the length of the doorframe, each letter jagged and desperate. Beneath it, smaller words sprawled. Lists of names, dozens, maybe hundreds, some I could barely read, eroded by time. Others looked fresh, as if carved yesterday. And near the bottom my own. E-L-I-S-W-A-R-D. The letters were shallow, tentative, as though unfinished. My stomach turned to ice. I staggered back, but the door slammed shut behind me. Panic clawed my chest. I spun, groping in the dark, my hands searching for the knob. There was none, only smooth, damp wood. The air thickened, pressing against my ears. A sound rose low, resonant, almost like humming. Not quite voices, not quite wind. The kind of sound you feel more in your ribs than your ears. A pale light flickered ahead, weak, wavering, but enough to guide me. I followed it, every step, reluctant. The floor sloped downward, the boards giving way to stone. Moisture slicked the walls. I descended a narrow stair, the light drawing me like a moth. At the bottom, the passage opened into a chamber. Candles burned in niches carved into the walls, their flames pale blue, casting long, skeletal shadows. The floor was covered in ribbons, hundreds of them knotted, frayed, some soaked dark with stains I did not want to name. In the center stood a lectern of stone. Upon it rested a great book, its pages warped with damp. The light had come from the book itself, a glow seeping through the cracks of its pages, as if words inside burned with their own fire. I approached, unable to stop myself. The ribbons crunched beneath my boots. They whispered as I stepped on them, faint sighs that might have been voices. The book's cover was leather, black and cracked. No title, only another symbol burned into it. The circle with a line through it. The crossed-out moon. My hand trembled as I opened it. Inside, page after page of names, written in that same careful hand as the notes I had found, each name accompanied by a date. Some names were crossed out, others bore a single word beside them, retained. I flipped forward, pages crumbling under my touch. The further I went, the fresher the ink. And then, on the most recent page, I saw it again. Elias Ward. The date was blank. Waiting. The candles hissed. A draft swept the room. Though no door or window stood open, the ribbons rustled like a field of dry grass. From the shadows at the edges of the chamber, figures began to emerge, pale, translucent, children and adults alike, their eyes hollow, their lips whispering soundless words. One child stepped closer, a girl no older than 10, ribbon tied tight around her wrist. She raised a finger and pointed at the book. Then her mouth moved, retained. The word carried, though no breath escaped her. It clanged in my skull like a bell struck too close. I slammed the book shut. The glow vanished. The figures recoiled, hissing, melting back into the shadows. The candles sputtered, nearly going out. In the sudden dimness, I heard another sound, a slow, deliberate chime, muffled, but unmistakable. 1, 2, 3. Not from above, not from the clock tower, from beneath the floor. The chimes came slow, patient, each one vibrating through the stone floor beneath my boots. They weren't bright like bells. They were heavy, breathy, like lungs straining to exhale. 4, 5, 6. The candles guttered with every sound, flames bending toward the center of the chamber as though dragged by unseen breath. 7, 8, 9. The ribbons writhed. Some uncoiled and slithered across the stones like snakes. Others tightened into knots until they snapped, the sound sharp as bone breaking. 10, 11, 12. I braced myself, every muscle taut. My chest hurt with each inhale. I knew what was coming. And then the 13th. Not a chime. A sigh. A deep, endless exhalation that filled the chamber with pressure. My knees buckled. Dust rained from the ceiling. The book on the lectern shuddered, pages fluttering as if 100 unseen hands were turning them at once. The pale figures returned, pressing closer, their whispers rising into a desperate chorus. Their mouths moved, but their words did not match their voices. They spoke as one. "Join us? The choir is never complete." I staggered back, toward the stair, but the doorway had sealed stone where there had been air. The only exit was down, deeper into the chamber, where the glow now pulsed beneath the floor like a buried heartbeat. The girl with the ribbon stepped closer, her hollow eyes fixed on mine. She raised her hand again and pointed not to the book this time, but to me. "You are written," she whispered. The 13th sigh grew louder, becoming a pulse, a vibration that shook the marrow of my bones. I clutched the horseshoe in my pocket, iron biting into my palm. The figures recoiled slightly, their edges blurring. I forced myself forward through the sea of ribbons, toward the lectern. The book glowed faintly even while shut, its leather trembling like skin. With a surge of desperate strength, I seized the book and hurled it from the stand. It struck the floor with a deafening crack, pages tearing free, ribbons bursting into ash. The 13th sound faltered, stuttered like a breath caught in its own throat. The chamber convulsed. Shadows screamed. The stone beneath me heaved, cracking open to reveal a staircase spiraling downward into deeper dark. The figures shrank back, wailing without sound, their mouths open wider than humanly possible. The girl clutched her ribbon, shaking her head, mouthing words I almost understood don't follow. But the pull from below was stronger. The air itself leaned toward the stair, dragging me forward. I stumbled, clutching the wall for balance, the horseshoe burning in my hand as the chamber above dissolved into fog and whispers. Step by step, I descended into the dark. The stair twisted downward for what felt like hours, stone slick beneath my palms, the air thick with dust and old breath. My body begged me to turn back, but each step carried the weight of inevitability. The house had decided my direction. At last, the passage spilled into a corridor. Unlike the damp chamber above, this hall was dry too dry. The air smelled of chalk and parchment. The walls were lined with doors, each identical, tall, narrow. Their wood dark as coal. Iron locks protruded, heavy and elaborate, some as large as my hand. Every door bore the same carved sigil, the circle with a line through it, the crossed-out moon. I moved cautiously, trailing my fingers across the symbols. The grooves were fresh, sharper than centuries should allow. As I walked, I realized something disturbing. The locks were all on the outside. Whatever these doors held, the house wanted kept in. At the 5th door, I stopped. A faint sound drifted through the woods, scratching, frantic, like nails dragged over stone. I pressed my ear closer. The scratching ceased. A silence fell so complete it seemed to swallow even my own heartbeat. Then, softly, a whisper seeped through. "Elias." I stumbled back, nearly tripping over the uneven floor. My name. Again. Always my name. The horseshoe in my pocket warmed. The iron's presence steadied me, though my hands trembled. I forced myself onward. At the 7th door, the whisper came louder, urgent. Don't open. I froze. The voice was thin, childlike. I crouched, peering at the gap beneath the door. A ribbon lay there, black, frayed, curling outward as if reaching for me. It twitched. I backed away. Further down, the corridor ended in a massive double door, taller than the others, carved with sigils upon sigils, layers of circles and slashes that spiraled into something like an eye. Chains wrapped the handles, thick iron links fused with rust. And yet, despite its bindings, I heard breathing from beyond. Slow, deep, patient, the sound of something that had waited far too long. As I stared, a draft stirred the chains. A slip of paper fluttered free from between them, landing at my feet. I picked it up with shaking fingers, the same handwriting as the other notes. Neat and deliberate. The wing is locked for a reason. If you unbind it, you will not leave whole. Midnight is listening. I crumpled the note, shoving it into my pocket beside the horseshoe. My throat was dry, my pulse ragged. Behind me, the corridor groaned, wood and stone shifting as though the house had grown impatient. I turned, ready to retrace my steps only to find the stair gone. The wall stood smooth, unbroken, as if no staircase had ever existed. I was trapped. The locks rattled softly, one by one, as if unseen hands were testing them. From within the doors came faint tapping, scratching, the occasional soft sob, and always, beneath it all, the breathing from the chained door. The corridor had gone still, but it wasn't empty. I could feel them, whatever waiting behind those locked doors. Each lock glimmered faintly in the candlelight, as if polished by constant touch from the inside. I forced myself forward, telling my body to move, though my legs felt like stone. At the 8th door, a low thud shook the wood steady, rhythmic like a heartbeat too strong for flesh. I stepped back quickly, but the door did not stir again. At the 9th, the whispering began anew. Dozens of voices layered, rising and falling like waves. Fragments of names, hymns I half remembered from childhood, laughter that dissolved into sobs. My head spun. It felt as though they were pressing not just against the door, but against the inside of my skull. I pressed the horseshoe to my forehead, desperate for its weight, and the noise thinned enough for me to stagger on. Halfway down the corridor, I noticed something strange. A door standing slightly ajar, not wide, just a crack, but enough for black air to seep through like smoke. Every instinct screamed at me to leave it alone, but curiosity, damned, traitorous curiosity, pulled me closer. I pushed gently. The door creaked open into a small cell, bare except for a narrow bed and a mirror fixed to the far wall. Dust coated everything, yet the mirror gleamed unnaturally bright. As I stepped inside, the door closed softly behind me. My reflection stared back from the glass, pale and ragged eyes wide, but then it smiled. I hadn't. The image lifted its hand, palm out. My own hand twitched to mimic it, though I fought the pull. The smile widened, lips parting as if to speak, and then I heard it my own voice, but not mine. Stay. You belong here. The mirror darkened, my reflection's eyes sinking into hollows, its skin cracked like plaster. Flakes falling away to reveal something gray and rotting beneath. Yet the smile never faded. I staggered back, colliding with the bed. Dust billowed, and for a moment I saw shapes in a children curled into themselves, lips moving in silent prayers. The reflection pressed its palm against the glass. A faint bulge pushed outward, as though the mirror were softening, stretching, preparing to let something through. With a cry, I hurled the iron horseshoe at the mirror. The glass cracked in a spiderweb of fractures, light bleeding through the cracks like thin fire. My reflection shrieked not in my voice now, but in dozens, hundreds of voices at once. The room convulsed. The door slammed open of its own accord. I stumbled into the hall as the mirror exploded behind me, shards tinkling like rain. The whispers in the other doors grew louder, agitated. Locks rattled violently. The chained double door at the end of the hall groaned, the links quivering as if something beyond strained against them. The note's words burned in my pocket. If you unbind it, you will not leave whole. For the first time, I believed them. The corridor throbbed with noise. No scratches, knocks, muffled cries. Each door seemed alive, straining against its hinges. I pressed my back to the wall, clutching the horseshoe like a talisman, my breath shallow and ragged. From the far end, the chained double door shuddered. The iron links quaked, dust falling in thin veils. A groan swelled from behind at long low, inhuman, like the earth itself mourning. The smaller doors answered with their own chorus. It wasn't words this time, but rhythm. Fists pounding, nails clawing, sobs matching the cadence of the unseen heart. Beyond the chains, the house wanted me closer. I forced my legs to move, inching toward the double door as if pulled by invisible hands. The carved eye in its center seemed to widen as I approached, the spiraling sigils flexing like muscle. Another slip of paper slid from between the chains, fluttering to the ground. I bent to read it. Do not name yourself beyond this point. It listens. My mouth dried. I tucked the note away with the others, but its warning etched itself into my skull. Halfway down, the 9th door burst outward an inch, its lock snapping with a gunshot crack. I stumbled back as a hand pail, skeletal, ribbon-tied, reached into the hall. Fingers clawed at the air, straining for me. I swung the horseshoe, iron striking bone. The hand recoiled with a shriek that rang in my teeth. The door slammed shut, lock reforming before my eyes, as though the house itself had repaired it. My knees nearly gave out. This place was no ruin, it was alive, a prison that healed its own scars. At last, I stood before the chained double door. The breathing behind it was steady, immense. Each inhale pulled the air from my lungs. Each exhale filled the corridor with heat that smelled of dust and blood. The chains rattled, not in protest but in invitation. I reached out, compelled, my hand hovering over the iron. The sigils pulsed faintly, the carved eye opening wider, its groove black with shadow. A whisper seeped through the crack between the doors, low and patient. Choir waits? You are. The note unfinished. I staggered back, shaking my head violently. No, I muttered. Not me. The whisper deepened, stretching into a sound more vibration than word. Elias. I clamped my teeth together so hard pain shot into my jaw. The note's warning screamed in my head. Do not name yourself. The corridor groaned. Locks rattled. Dust poured from the ceiling in lazy streams. The house was waiting for me to answer. I... Instead, I lifted the horseshoe high and slammed it against the chains. The sound cracked like thunder. Sparks flew. The whisper faltered into a hiss. For a moment, silence. Then, from the other side, a roar so deep it rattled every bone in my body. The chains snapped, taut, straining to hold. The smaller doors shrieked in unison, their locks beating like drums. The corridor convulsed. Boards split. Shadows swarmed like insects freed from nests. I staggered back, iron still hot in my hand, as the chain door bulged outward with each breath from the thing beyond. The bulge in the chain door grew with every breath from behind it, the wood swelling like ribs under strain. The iron links screamed against their own tension, dust pouring from the ceiling in choking clouds. The smaller doors along the corridor pounded louder, each one shaking on its hinges. I could hear them now, voices layered in a single desperate chant. Open, open, open. My head throbbed. My vision blurred. The house was no longer a building, it was a throne, and I stood inside it. The chains snapped, one by one. Each break rang through me like a bone splintering. The carved eye in the wood widened further, its grooves weeping dark resin that dripped down the panels. From the crack between the doors, a wind surged hot and foul, carrying whispers that clawed at my mind. Memories I hadn't told anyone, secrets I thought buried. The house knew me, and it wanted to strip me. There. I pressed the horseshoe to my chest, gripping it so tight the edges cut my palm. The iron burned steady and grounding, but the pull of the door only grew. Another slip of paper fluttered free, landing at my feet. I almost didn't pick it up, but my hand moved before I could stop it. If it calls your name again, do not answer with your mouth. Answer with the iron. The chains quivered violently. The whisper came again, deep and patient, filling every corner of the hall. Elias. The letters dragged through the air like claws through flesh. My lips trembled. My throat ached with the urge to respond, to surrender, to say yes. Instead, I raised the horseshoe and struck the door where the eye was carved. The impact boomed like thunder. Splinters flew. A scream vast, furious stole from behind the wood. The eye clenched shut, resin spraying like blood. The chains pulled tight, sealing, welding themselves together with sparks. The corridor howled. Locks snapped shut one by one. The voices behind the smaller doors shrieked in rage. Then silence. I staggered back, chest heaving, the air thinned, the corridor shrinking into itself. The double door still throbbed with breath, but quieter now, as if the iron had pressed it deeper into sleep. Then, just as suddenly, the wall behind me cracked. Light split through, blinding after so much dark. I stumbled toward it, clawing through splinters, until I spilled back into the main hall above. The house had let me go this time. I collapsed against the banister, blood dripping from my palm where the iron had bitten deep. The horseshoe was hotter than ever, pulsing faintly, as if it had absorbed the echo of that scream. And from somewhere far below, through stone and shadow, I heard the 13th breath. Breath against. The main hall had changed. When I stumbled back from the locked wing, it wasn't the same space I had left. The portraits were gone, stripped from the walls. The great chandelier that once dangled above now lay shattered across the floor, its crystals glittering like shards of ice. And stretching from the base of the staircase toward the east wing was a new passage, long, straight, and lined entirely with mirrors. At first, I thought they were simply hung there, but as I drew closer, I saw the truth. The mirrors weren't mounted, they were the walls themselves. Floor to ceiling, polished glass held in gilded frames that merged seamlessly with the architecture. The corridor pulsed faintly with light, though no lamps burned. The glow seemed to come from within the mirrors themselves, as if each held a secret sun. I approached cautiously, breath frosting in the chill. My reflection met me at every step. Dozens of versions of myself staring back, paler, gaunter, their eyes too sharp. When I raised my hand, they raised theirs, but the movements were always a fraction late, lagging by a heartbeat. I paused, unsettled. One reflection tilted its head when I did not. The horseshoe in my palm felt heavier. I stepped into the corridor. Instantly, the air grew thick, muffled, as though I'd walked underwater. My footsteps rang sharp, then dulled, then vanished entirely, swallowed by glass. The reflections multiplied. Not just me, other figures appeared in the far distance, blurry, indistinct. Some were tall, some small, some hunched. They did not move as I did. They lingered in doorways that didn't exist, shadows in corners that weren't there. At the 5th mirror, I stopped cold. The reflection staring back wasn't mine. It was my mother. She looked exactly as I remembered her on the last night at Greywick, hair wet with rain, eyes wide with terror, lips pressed tight as she dragged me down the cliff path. Her hand reached out from the glass, beckoning. My throat closed. "You're not real," I whispered. Her eyes filled with tears. Her mouth moved. "Don't look back, Elias." The same words she had spoken 20 years ago. I stumbled forward, hand lifting involuntarily toward the mirror. The glass felt warm beneath my fingers, as though skin pressed against it from the other side. Then, suddenly, her face cracked like porcelain. The skin fell away in flakes, revealing the hollow sockets of a skull. The reflection grinned and whispered in 100 voices at once, Stay. I tore my hand back, stumbling down the corridor. My pulse thundered. Every mirror now showed something different. Faces I have recognized. People from childhood, strangers, corpses, versions of myself, older, younger, broken, dead. Some laughed, some wept, some pounded against the glass, mouths forming my name in silence. I pressed the horseshoe to my chest and forced myself onward, the corridor stretching endlessly ahead, the reflections multiplying until I no longer knew which one was truly mine. And somewhere deep in the glass, faint but growing louder, came the sound of a bell. Not 12, not 13, 14. The 14th bell rang only in the mirrors, not in the air, not through the walls, but inside the glass itself. Each reflection shuddered at the sound, as if the strike rattled their bones instead of mine. I staggered forward, pressing my free hand to the gilded frame nearest me. The mirror vibrated beneath my touch, humming with resonance. My reflection blurred, then split into two versions. One that copied me exactly, and another that smiled when I did not. I yanked my hand away. The second reflection pressed closer to the glass, lips parting in a hiss I could almost hear. Trade places. The mirrors ahead pulsed in rhythm, a strobe of pale light drawing me deeper into the hall. Each pulse carried fragments of whispers, children laughing, hymns sung backward, the sound of my own voice calling my name from far away. At the 7th mirror, I stopped again. This one didn't show me at all. It showed a corridor identical to the one I stood in, but empty. I leaned closer. No footsteps, no breathing, just an endless hole of mirrors without me in it. Then, in the distance of that other corridor, a shadow appeared. It was tall, spindly, moving with deliberate slowness. Its hands dragged along the walls as if caressing the glass. The shadow turned its head, though it had no face. I felt its gaze find me. My breath fogged the mirror, but the thing inside continued to move closer, unbothered. I fled, heart hammering. The corridor seemed to lengthen with every step. The mirrors warped my reflection until I barely recognized myself. Hollow-eyed, bloodied, wearing ribbons that dug into my wrists. One version of me staggered with a broken neck. Another whispered with lips sewn shut. Another stood perfectly still, smiling with a patience I knew wasn't mine. I pressed the horseshoe against the glass as I passed each one. The iron burned the surface, leaving faint black streaks. The reflections recoiled, faces twisting with anger, but the shadow in the empty mirror was closer now. No matter how far I ran, it matched my distance, gliding soundlessly, its limbs stretching too long for human form. I reached the midpoint of the corridor. A grand arch loomed overhead, carved with the same crossed-out moon sigil. Beneath it stood a pedestal, and upon it, a single candle burned with a flame the color of bone. The wax dripped upward instead of down, vanishing into the flame. Beside the candle lay a note. Light it when the mirrors begin to sing. Do not let them finish the hymn. I pocketed the note, staring at the pale fire. My hands shook as I lifted the candle. The flame did not burn my skin, was cold, almost soothing. Behind me, the mirrors began to hum, low at first, like the tuning of a great choir, then higher, sharper, until the glass trembled in its frames. They were preparing to sing. The hum rose into harmony. Every mirror vibrated, their surfaces rippling like disturbed water. My reflections opened their mouths in unison. Though I had not, the sound swelled, pressing against my ears, my chest, my ribs. It wasn't music, it was a hymn in reverse, a melody gutted of meaning, yet still terrible in its order. The shadow in the empty mirror raised its long arms as if conducting. I clutched the cold-burning candle. The note's words seared my mind. Do not let them finish the hymn. The hymn built higher. Glass cracked under the strain. Spiderweb fractures spreading across the mirrors. My alternate selves sang without sound, their throats moving too fast for breath. Some bled from their mouths. Some wept black tears. All of them stared directly at me. I ran. The corridor pulsed with every note. Shards fell from the ceiling, tinkling like chimes. The iron horseshoe throbbed in my pocket, vibrating with the false rhythm of the hymn. At the 9th mirror, I stopped dead. It didn't show me at all, it showed the chamber below. The one with the book of names. The lectern stood empty. The ribbons writhed on the floor like worms. And in the center, the girl I had seen before, small, pale, ribbon knotted tight around her wrist. She stared up at me through the glass, as though the mirror were a window. Her lips formed a word. Rung? The mirror cracked down the middle. The hymn surged louder. The shadow, conducting with frenzy. The air turned heavy, suffocating. My knees buckled. I lifted the candle high. The pale flame flickered, sputtered. For an instant I feared it would vanish, but then it flared silent lightning in my palm. I pressed it to the nearest mirror. The glass screamed. A fissure tore through it, light spilling out like blood. My reflection collapsed, writhing, its mouth open in a silent howl. The hymn faltered, skipping a beat. I lunged to the next mirror, then the next, pressing the candle against them, burning fractures into their surfaces. Each one shrieked as though alive, voices breaking, harmony collapsing. The shadow thrashed in the empty mirror, limbs jerking too fast to follow. It slammed its hands against the glass, cracks spidering out beneath its touch. The hymn faltered again, then shattered into discord. The mirrors began to implode one by one, shards collapsing inward instead of outward. Each explosion sucked air from the corridor, pulling dust and screams into the void. I staggered forward, candle held high, as reflections died in chorus. My alternate selves clawed at their glass prisons, tearing their own faces in fury as their cages collapsed. The shadow fought harder, pounding at its boundary. With each strike, its form became clear along limbs, torso twisted, a mouth too wide. It howled silently, sound lost behind the collapsing hymn. Finally, the empty mirror cracked entirely, a single fracture racing from corner to corner. The shadow's mouth moved once more. Trade. And then it was gone, sucked into the void as the mirror shattered into nothing. I stood trembling in the wreckage. The corridor lay silent. The candle's flames still burned, steady and pale, dripping wax upward into air that no longer fought me. All the mirrors were gone. In their place, walls of black stone stretched featureless and mute. At the far end, a door waited, Tall, narrow, its wood polished to a shine. No sigils marked it. No locks held it. But as I stared, I realized it was not a door at all. It was a mirror, unbroken. The last one, and in it, I saw myself smiling. The last mirror waited at the end of the corridor. Unlike the others, its surface was flawless, no cracks, no distortions, polished so smooth it seemed like a sheet of still water. My reflection stood there perfectly, every detail precise, except for one thing. It smiled. I wasn't. The smile was wide, patient, almost tender, as though it had been waiting for me all along. My reflection tilted its head, studying me with a curiosity that felt invasive, surgical. I raised the candle. The flame flickered, ready. My reflection lifted its own candle identical, pale fire burning steady, but in its other hand, it held no horseshoe. Instead, it clutched a ribbon, black and knotted. The air thickened. The candle in my hand trembled violently, its wax dripping faster, upward in frantic streams. My reflection's flame burned calm, unshaken. It mouthed words I couldn't hear. I leaned closer. The whisper slid into my ears, not from the air, but from inside my skull. Step through. One must stay. The smile widened. The reflection beckoned with the ribbon, shaking at once as if to tempt me. My knees bent forward before I realized. The glass rippled, soft as water. I reached out, and the surface accepted my hand up to the wrist. Cold, wet, like plunging into a river in winter. On the other side, my reflection reached out to, gripping my arm with shocking force. Its skin was colder than the glass, but strong, stronger than me. I yanked back, but it pulled harder, dragging me inch by inch into the mirror. My chest struck the surface. It rippled again, sucking at me like quicksand. I cried out, slamming the candle against the glass. The flame left no mark. My reflection only laughed silently, gripping tighter, tugging with an inevitability that felt ancient. In desperation, I dropped the candle and seized the horseshoe. The iron burned like a live coal in my palm. With a roar, I smashed it against the mirror. The glass shrieked, cracks spidered out from the impact, racing across the surface. My reflection's grip faltered, its smile twisting into rage. Black ichor seeped from its hand where the horseshoe touched. Trade, it screamed inside my skull. No, I gasped, and struck again. The mirror shattered. The reflection screamed as it was torn apart, shards swallowing its body piece by piece until nothing remained. The corridor howled with the collapse air rushing, walls trembling, a sound like 1,000 throats exhaling at once. When the dust cleared, I stood alone. The final mirror was gone, leaving only a narrow wooden door, simple and unmarked. I bent to pick up the candle, but it had gone out. The wick was cold, the wax hardened, as though it had never burned. My reflection was nowhere. The corridor was stone once more, silent but watching. I gripped the horseshoe tight, my palm blistered and bleeding. The door before me seemed ordinary, yet every instinct screamed otherwise. From behind it came a faint sound, children humming, off-key, weaving threads of melody that almost formed a hymn but broke apart at every turn. I pressed my forehead to the door. The wood pulsed faintly, like skinned over a heartbeat. Another note was pinned there, written in that same steady hand. You've survived the corridor, but mirrors always remember. One day, one will not break. I pocketed it, swallowed hard, and turned the knob. The door creaked open into deeper darkness, and the house, satisfied, inhaled. The door closed behind me with a sigh, as though the house itself had been holding its breath. The corridor beyond was different from the rest, wider, warmer, lit by gas lamps that flickered with a sickly yellow flame. The walls were lined not with portraits or mirrors, but with doors, each one slightly open, light spilling from within. And from those rooms came voices, laughter, muffled conversation, the faint scrape of chairs, the clink of glassware, the sounds of life, normal life. I froze. After the corridors of chains and mirrors, the domesticity felt wrong. I crept forward, peering into the first room. Inside sat a family of 4 around a dining table. A mother ladled soup into bowls. A father poured wine. Children whispered jokes and giggled. The scene was cozy, ordinary except their faces were blurred, smudged, as if painted in haste and left unfinished. When the father lifted his glass, I saw the ribbon tied around his wrist, black, knotted. The mother's laugh caught in her throat, twisted, became a sob. No one reacted. I staggered back and moved on. The next door revealed an old woman knitting in a rocking chair. The needles clicking steadily, she hummed a lullaby under her breath, but her mouth never moved. The sound came from the walls around her instead, echoing her presence. The scarf she knitted was endless, spooling from her lap to the floor, across the boards, and vanishing under the door. She did not look up. Further down, another room showed a man at a desk, scribbling furiously into a ledger identical to the one Mara had shown me in the library. His hand never paused. Page after page filled with names, each one written in the same immaculate script. His eyes were gone, sockets hollow, yet his head moved as though reading from something only he could see. The corridors seemed endless, each room opening onto another fragment of life preserved in amber. Couples dancing without music. Children playing with toys that dissolved into smoke when dropped. Men and women staring at walls, whispering to invisible companions. The residents, they didn't acknowledge me, not directly. But as I passed, some turned their heads a fraction, too sharp, too quick, their blurred faces twitching toward me. I pressed the horseshoe to my chest and hurried on. At the far end of the corridor, a grand salon opened, the ceiling arched high, gilded beams catching the lamplight. Dozens of residents mingled here, their forms flickering at the edges, their movements rehearsed like actors repeating the same play forever. A woman in a crimson gown approached. Unlike the others, her face was clear, beautiful, ageless, her eyes sharp as cut glass. "You came," she said, her voice smooth, commanding. "The house has waited." I swallowed hard. "What are you?" She smiled. "Hosts, guests, prisoners, names written and retained. We are the residents, Elias Ward, and soon you will be one of us." Her smile never wavered, but the residents around her froze mid-gesture. The dancers halted in a pose to stiff, glasses stopped halfway to blurred lips, children locked in the act of laughter with teeth that seemed too many. It was as if the room itself awaited my answer. I didn't come by choice, I managed, clutching the horseshoe tighter. The woman tilted her head. Choice is a lie we give ourselves to feel less like prey. You opened the letter. You crossed the threshold. You stepped where the fog allowed. That is choice enough for the house. She stepped closer, her gown whispered across the boards, the crimson fabric flickering like flame. The closer she came, the colder the air grew. I forced my voice steady. Why me? Her eyes glimmered. Because you were promised long ago. You were written. At her words, the residents stirred again, resuming their endless pantomime. Yet now, I noticed their whispers sinking, threads of sound weaving into a low chant. Not words, I knew syllables fractured, wrong. But the rhythm was steady. The woman raised her hand. Instantly, the voices hushed. She gestured to the far wall where an enormous painting hung, almost floor to ceiling. Its frame was gilt, its canvas cracked with age. It showed Greywick House, perched upon the cliff, fog curling around its foundations. In the foreground stood dozens of figures. Men, women, children, all with black ribbons tied around their wrists. Their faces were unfinished blurs, strokes of paint left incomplete, except one. At the very edge of the crowd, half hidden in fog, a boy's face was clear. My face. My stomach lurched. That's impossible. The woman's voice was soft, indulgent. You were marked before memory. The house does not forget what it is owed. I left, I whispered. My mother took me away. I never. You returned, she interrupted smoothly. The circle closes. Her hand brushed the frame. The paint rippled. Fog inside the painting stirring like mist on water. I stumbled back. No! The residents nearest me turned their heads in unison. Their blurred faces twitched into grotesque smiles, teeth glimmering where no detail should have been. The woman's tone sharpened. There are only two ways here. To be retained, or to be released. Retained is simple. You take the ribbon. You join the residents. You are written forever into the house. And released, I asked hoarsely. Her smile deepened. Few find that door. Fewer leave all. The ribbon on my wrist, the one I had picked up in the West Wing, tightened suddenly. Though I had not tied it, it cinched around my skin, the knot biting until I cried out. The residents laughed together, the sound hollow, echoing, joyless. I tore at the knot, fingers slipping on the frayed threads. The iron horseshoe scorched my palm, and when I pressed it against the ribbon, the fabric hissed and loosened slightly. The woman hissed too, her composure cracking. Iron has no place here. For the first time, I saw anger in her perfect face. The woman's eyes flared, catching the lamplight like shards of glass. Around us, the residents froze again, their blurred faces jerking toward me. It was as if her fury rippled outward and chained them all at once. You cling to iron, she said, her voice low and venomous. Do you think it will save you? Iron burns us, yes, but it cannot unwrite what is written. I held the horseshoe higher, heart pounding. Then why? Fear it. For a moment, her expression cracked. Anger twisted into something else. Something like grief. But the mask slipped back too quickly. Because it reminds us of what we were before we were named, she said softly. And memory is pain. She gestured sharply. Two residents peeled themselves from the crowd, their blurred forms stretching, solidifying. One was tall and broad, the other hunched, their hands bound by black ribbons that trailed across the floor. They moved toward me. I backed away, pressing into the edge of the room. My breath fogged in the air. The iron burned hotter in my grip. The tall one reached first. Its hand was blurred at first touch, then sharpened into long fingers with broken nails. I swung the horseshoe and struck. The thing shrieked, its body unraveling into smoke, ribbons falling in a heap. The hunched one lunged from the side, its face sharpened as it came close. An old man's face, sunken and hollow, lips sewn shut with black thread. It clawed for my throat. I pressed the horseshoe against its chest. The body convulsed, spasmed, then burst into ash that rained down silently on the floorboards. Gasps echoed from the residents still standing. They did not move, but their blurred heads tilted, twitching. The chant began again, rising louder. Fractured syllables that cut like broken glass. The woman lifted her hand and the chant stopped instantly. "You wound us," she said calmly, though her eyes blazed. "But you cannot kill what is already retained. Strike one, and another takes its place. Strike 10, and the house will write 10 more." She stepped closer until her face was inches from mine. "You can hurt us," Elias warned. "But you cannot end us." Her whisper burned my ear. "Unless..." Her words pierced deeper than any blade. The residents began to move, again not toward me, but around me, circling. Their blurred faces wavered, some flickering into clarity for brief seconds. I saw people I half remembered. A childhood friend, a teacher, neighbors from Raven's Hollow Bay. All of them bearing ribbons. The circle tightened, their whispers layering into something almost like a hymn. The woman raised her arms. "Join us, sing with us. The house remembers, and the choir is waiting." The chant surged. The chandelier above shuddered, though it had already shattered. The very air vibrated with the rhythm, and beneath it all, faint but rising, I heard it again, the 13th breath. Slow, patient, inside the lungs of the house. The chant swelled until the walls themselves shook, lamps flickered. Shadows stretched like black ribbons across the floor. The circle of residents tightened, their faceless forms leaning closer, their whispers scraping against my skin. The woman in crimson stood at the center, her arms raised high, her smile carved too sharp. "The house breathes you in, Elias. It has waited too long. You are already written. All that remains is to bind the knot." She extended her hand. A ribbon materialized between her fingers, black, frayed, slick as if wet. She stepped forward, and the circle parted for her, their blurred forms bowing like worshippers. My throat clenched. The ribbon writhed in her hand. Alive, hungry, I stumbled back until my spine struck the painting of Greywitt House. The canvas was warm, pulsing faintly. I glanced down and saw that the boy's face, my face, was clearer than ever, sharpened as though newly painted. His eyes moved, staring at me, pleading silently. The woman pressed the ribbon toward my wrist. "No more running. The choir needs its note. You are the unfinished chord." The chant rose into a shriek, dozens of voices splitting into one. My hand shook violently as I raised the horseshoe. The iron throbbed, hot as a forge, searing my palm. The ribbon touched my skin cold, suffocating, trying to cinch around my wrist. I slammed the horseshoe down. The iron struck the ribbon with a hiss like steam. The knot burned, fibers blackening, the air filling with the stench of scorched cloth. The woman screamed a sound too high, too wide, rattling the beams overhead. The residents collapsed to the floor in unison, their forms unraveling into blurred smoke. The painting shuddered, canvas tearing, the boy's face dissolving into fog. I staggered forward, horseshoe race, striking again and again until the ribbon fell in two charred halves at my feet. The woman reeled, her perfect face cracking like porcelain, fragments flaking away to reveal a hollow void beneath. She hissed, clutching her chest as if the strike had pierced her heart. "You cannot unwrite yourself," she shrieked. "You cannot." Her body exploded into smoke, scattering across the salon like ash in wind. The chant stopped. The residents were gone. The hall stood empty, silent, though the lamps still flickered weakly. I collapsed to my knees, the horseshoe burning in my blistered hand. My breath came ragged, each inhale trembling. Then, from deep below the floor, the 13th sound returned. One long, steady breath. The walls pulsed in rhythm, the chandelier's shards rattled against the boards, and a whisper slid through the silence, soft but certain. "She was never the house. We are not undone. The choir waits. The 13th waits." The salon lay empty when the smoke of the residents cleared, but the silence was worse than their whispers. I stood trembling, the burned halves of the ribbon at my feet, the horseshoe blistering hot in my hand. My lungs ached with each breath, as though I were inhaling not air but the house itself. And then, slowly, the chandeliers above reassembled. The shattered crystals rose from the floor one by one, drifting upward like stars pulled into orbit. Chains mended, metal twisted back into place. Within seconds, the great light hung whole again, burning with a black flame that gave no light but devoured it. The hall stretched wider, the walls pulling away into shadows. Long tables appeared, draped in cloth the color of dried blood. Silver platters shimmered into existence, each one bearing shapes I didn't want to recognize. Meat too dark, fruit too pale, wine that clung to the goblets like oil. Chairs scraped, The residents had returned. They filed in through the walls as though smoke had learned to walk. Men, women, children blurred and shifted took their seats along the endless tables. Their mouths moved in silent laughter. Their hands lifted empty goblets that filled themselves with that black wine. At the head of the table sat no woman in crimson, no familiar host. Instead, the chair remained empty, massive, carved with the crossed-out moon. The air tightened. The walls pulsed, and with a long, steady exhale, the chair was filled. It wasn't a man, nor a woman. It was a shape made of shadow and breath, stitched together by ribbons that wrapped its body like veins. Its face was an absence, a hole in the air where features should have been. The 13th. My chest seized. Every resident raised their goblet in unison. Though their blurred eyes never turned from me, the shadow spread its hand. And though its mouth was nothing, its voice filled every corner of the hall. Platters rattled. Lids lifted themselves, releasing steam that smelled of iron and rot. The residents leaned forward eagerly, but they did not touch the food. They looked at me, waiting. I shook my head violently. No. The 13th leaned forward. The ribbons binding its form quivered, tightening. Its voice came again, deeper now, shaking the tableware. Elias Ward. The name thundered inside my skull. My mouth ached to obey, my throat twitching with hunger that wasn't mine. The food on the platters writhed meat, squirming like worms, fruit splitting to reveal eyes that blinked weightly. The goblet nearest me filled to the brim and tipped, sliding across the table until it stopped before my hand. Inside the black wine, my reflection stared back, smiling. The residents began to chant. Low, rhythmic. Low, forks struck plates in unison. A metallic percussion. Eat, eat. I stumbled back, horseshoe raised. I won't. The 13th shape tilted, ribbons tightening like ropes ready to strangle. The whisper came again, softer this time, coaxing. One taste, one sip. You are already written. Eating only binds what is already bound. The goblet trembled. My reflection inside it leaned closer, lips parting to drink. My hand shook, my hunger twisted. Not mine, but planted, growing with each chant. I slammed the goblet to the floor. The wine hissed, searing the boards, burning a black hole that spread in cracks like veins. The residents shrieked as one. The shriek of the residents rattled the plates toppled, goblets spilled black wine across the tablecloths, which soaked it up greedily like skin-drinking blood. The 13th rose from its chair. Its ribbons unraveled into the air, long and endless, slashing like whips that never struck but threatened, hissing through the space, its faceless head tilted toward me. And though there were no eyes, I felt myself pinned. The residents froze mid-shriek, then fell silent. One by one, they turned their heads toward me, blurred faces flickering into sudden clarity. I saw neighbors from my childhood, classmates, strangers from Ravens. All of them stared with the same expression. Hunger. The 13th spread its arms. The platters of food twitched and shuddered, their contents reshaping. the worms of meat twisted into ribbons, writhing black cords that tied themselves into figure-8 knots. The fruit cracked open to reveal not eyes but mouths, whispering in unison. "Eat, Elias, eat." The voices were hundreds layered. Perfect harmony. I staggered back, horseshoe scorching my palm. "No, you can't make me." The 13th leaned closer. The ribbons around its form tightened, drawing its body into sharper definition. I saw bones beneath the shadow, a rib cage built not of bone but of knotted cords, each one pulsing faintly. Its voice was no longer a whisper, it was thunder made intimate. "You are the 13th note. You complete the choir. Eat and you are bound. Refuse, and you are devoured." The residents reached for the food at last. Their blurred hands plunged into the platters, scooping the writhing ribbons, the whispering fruit. They lifted handfuls to their mouths and consumed. I gagged as the sound filled the hall. Chewing, slurping, lips smacking in grotesque unison. Some residents swallowed too quickly, the food wriggling in their throats, pushing against their skin from inside. Their blurred faces bulged, mouths stretching impossibly wide. They laughed while they choked, and then, in their laughter, they spoke my name. "Elias, Elias, Elias." The 13th extended one long ribboned hand. A platter slid from the table, gliding across the floor until it stopped at my feet. Upon it lay a single piece of fruit, round, pale, pulsing faintly like a heart. I stared, bile rising in my throat. Inside the translucent skin, I saw shapes, fingers, a face. My face. It mouthed the words silently. "Eat me?" The residents pounded their fists against the tables in rhythm. The sound echoed like drums. The hymn rose again, sharper, faster. I clutched the horseshoe until my knuckles whitened. But even its iron weight seemed smaller in this hall of devouring. The 13th's voice came once more, soft and final. "The feast cannot end until you partake." The fruit pulsed on the platter, veins of shadow writhing beneath its pale skin. My reflection inside it blinked, its lips moving again, clearer this time. "Eat, and you will be safe." The residents cheered in silence, mouths opening and closing like fish, their blurred forms trembling with hunger not their own. They pounded the tables in rhythm, forks and goblets clattering in a metallic storm. The 13th loomed over them, its ribbons twitching like tendons, binding the hall tighter with every sway. The black flame in the chandelier flared, plunging the corners of the room into deeper dark. The scent of the fruit rose to meet me, sweet, cloying, mixed with copper. My stomach twisted violently. I lifted the horseshoe. Its heat was my anchor. My pulse hammered with it. "No," I rasped. The reflection inside the fruit scowled, its mouth stretched wide, ripping the skin, releasing a hiss like steam. Black liquid seeped out, running down the platter and dripping onto the floor. Where it touched, the boards writhed, curling like something alive, splintering as if roots pushed up from beneath. The residents howled in delight, pounding harder, their chant forming words again. "Bind, bind, bind." The 13th bent low, its faceless head nearly brushing mine. 1,000 whispers poured into my mind, voices of men, women, children. Some I knew, some I didn't. all saying the same thing in harmony. You already belong. I dropped to my knees, clutching my head, iron pressing into my brow. The voices battered me, overlapping, demanding, and then faint. Almost lost I heard another voice. Small, clear. The girl with the ribbon. Wrong. Make it wrong. The words jolted through me like lightning. I staggered up, grabbed the platter with both hands, and hurled it across the hall. The fruit struck the far wall and burst. Black liquid splattered upward, hissing, burning holes into the wallpaper. The reflection inside it screamed, dissolving into smoke. The hall convulsed. The residents shrieked, some clutching their mouths as though their tongues had been torn out. The tables trembled, platters overturning, wine spilling like tar. The 13th straightened, ribbons snapping taut, its voice booming with fury. Refuse, and be unmade. The chandeliers rattled violently. Plates shattered. The residents rose together, climbing onto the tables, their bodies contorting, jaws unhinging, throats stretching wide. From their mouths poured ribbons, black and endless, reaching toward me like tendrils. I swung the horseshoe wildly, iron burning each cord it touched. The ribbons recoiled with shrieks, but more surged forward. The girl's voice came again, louder this time, echoing from nowhere and everywhere. Wrong, ring wrong, my heart thundered. I raised the horseshoe high and struck it against the nearest goblet. The sound was jagged, broken, not a true note but a fractured clang. The hall froze. The ribbons recoiled, thrashing. The residents screamed, their bodies flickering like dying lanterns. The 13th reeled back, its form shivering, the faceless void of its head splitting wider in rage. The broken clang from the iron still vibrated in the air, raw and ugly. It wasn't music, it wasn't ritual, it was wrong, and the house hated wrong. The residents writhed, their blurred faces sharpening into masks of agony. Some clutched their heads, others tore at their own ribbons, unraveling until they dissolved into smoke. Their chant faltered, splitting into shrieks. The 13th's body spasmed, its ribbons flailed wildly, striking the tables, splintering wood and toppling platters. The faceless void where its head should have been split open like a mouth, releasing a roar so deep the chandeliers above shattered again, this time for real. Black fire rained down, burning the tables, setting the feast alight. The food shrieked as it burned, the fruit bursting into eyes that melted, the ribbons curling into ash. I staggered back, holding the horseshoe high. The girl's voice rang again, threading through the chaos. Strike again, ring wrong again. I slammed the iron against another goblet. The clang reverberated, louder this time. The floor heaved, buckling beneath me. The residents collapsed in heaps, their forms breaking into smoke and ribbons that slithered across the boards like worms seeking soil. The hall itself groaned, beams snapping, walls bowing. The 13th staggered, ribbons unraveling faster now. Its faceless void turned toward me, fury radiating from the absence of eyes. You break. That you shatter the feast. You will starve with us. Its voice shook my bones, but I struck again, iron to metal. The third clang rang jagged, shattering the last of the chandeliers. Darkness swallowed the hall. For a heartbeat, silence. Then, a breath. Not mine. Not the house's usual patient sigh. This was a gasp, sharp, startled, as if the house itself had been wounded. The 13th stumbled, its ribbons falling limp, the faceless head split wider, leaking smoke. With a final roar, it collapsed into itself, vanishing in a storm of ash and whispers. The tables dissolved. The feast rotted to dust in seconds. The residents were gone. Only the empty chair at the head of the table remained. Upon it lay a single note, scrawled in the same immaculate hand as always. Feasts end. Choirs do not. Midnight waits. I stood in the wreckage, lungs burning, horseshoe scorching my hand. The walls groaned. A door appeared at the far end of the ruined hall, small, plain, and waiting. Behind me, the silence was unbearable. The house held its breath again. I clutched the iron and stepped toward the door. Whatever lay beyond, I knew one thing for certain. The feast was over. But the hunger of the house was not. The plain door groaned as I pushed it open. On the other side stretched a stairwell that twisted impossibly, curling upward and downward at the same time, vanishing into shadow both above and below. The air was thick, humming faintly with a rhythm that matched my pulse. Each step I took rang too loud, as though echoing through centuries instead of seconds. Halfway down, or was it up? The hum sharpened. I looked at my watch out of habit, though I hadn't checked it since arriving at Greywick. The hands spun wildly. Hours flipped in seconds. Days collapsed into minutes. The glass face fogged, cracked, then stilled. Both hands pointed not at 12, but at 30. The stairs spat me out into a chamber that felt like the inside of a clock. Gears larger than houses ground together overhead, teeth gnashing, sparks leaping in the dark. Chains hung like pendulums, swaying though no wind moved them. At the center stood a pillar of stone, its surface covered in carvings, spirals, circles. The crossed-out moon repeated endlessly. Upon the pillar sat a clock. Not grand, not gilded, just a simple brass clock. Its hands frozen at midnight. But every time the gears above turned, the hands twitched, straining to move past 12. I stepped closer, breath caught in my throat. The horseshoe grew heavy, tugging downward as if resisting. Around the pillar lay figures, dozens, maybe hundreds, sprawled in circles. Some were children, some adults, all bound by ribbons, all perfectly still. Their skin was pale, waxy, yet their chests rose and fell faintly. Sleeping, waiting. I stumbled among them, trying not to trip. Some opened their eyes as I passed, glazed, cloudy, but alive. Their lips moved without sound, mouthing fragments of words I couldn't hear. The gears above struck together, a thunderclap of metal. The clock's hand twitched again, jerking violently. 1, 2, 3. I froze. The hand had struck forward, ticking 3 times at once. The gears reversed, grinding in the opposite direction. Time was breaking. The sleepers stirred. Their whispers rose in unison, threading together into a chant. 13. 13. 13. Their voices were not urgent, not angry, simply inevitable, like tides announcing themselves. I clutched the horseshoe tighter. My mind reeled, watching the hands of the clock jerk forward, then backward, then split entirely to hands pointing in opposite directions. The pillar cracked, dust raining down. The house was not bound by time. It was breaking time itself. The chant of the sleepers grew louder, rising and falling like the swing of a pendulum. Their voices blurred together until they became one endless tone, vibrating in my skull. The gears above twisted faster, teeth grinding sparks into the darkness. Some spun forward, others backward, none in rhythm. The chamber shook with every clash. The brass clock on the pillar groaned, its glass face cracked. Both hands strained against their axes, twitching back and forth until, with a sudden jerk, they split, one pointing at 12, the other at 13. The air wavered. My vision doubled. For a sickening moment, I saw two chambers overlaid, one where the sleepers still lay breathing softly, and another where they had risen, their faces hollow, ribbons strangling their wrists. A boy stirred near my feet, his cloudy eyes fixed on mine, his lips parted, dry and cracked, whispering words I could not hear. I knelt closer. "What?" he shuddered, voice barely audible. "Stop the clock, or it stops you." Before I could answer, his body convulsed violently, his mouth opened wide, wider than humanly possible, a black ribbon unfurling from his throat like a tongue. "It lashed toward me." I staggered back, swinging the horseshoe. Iron met fabric with a hiss, and the ribbon recoiled, writhing like a burned snake. The boy collapsed, motionless again. Around me, other sleepers twitched. Ribbons squirmed beneath their skin, pulsing in rhythm with the broken gears above. The chamber lurched. Time stuttered. 1 second. I was standing over the boy's body. The next, I was across the chamber, iron in hand, though I hadn't moved. Then again he was back, kneeling, heart hammering, breath stolen from a moment I hadn't lived. The gears clashed violently overhead. Sparks rained like stars. The house was pulling me through time like a puppet through tangled strings. I pressed the iron to my chest, anchoring myself. The dissonance thinned slightly, but the pillar continued to crack, its surface splitting wider. The brass clog's hands spun madly now, one racing forward, the other backward, both straining to escape their axis. And from within the pillar, beneath the grinding of gears, I heard it. A 13th tick. Slow, patient, waiting. The chant of the sleeper shifted. No longer 13. Now they whispered my name. Elias, Elias, Elias. Their voices overlapped with the clock's breaking rhythm, pulling me apart, scattering my thoughts across moments that weren't mine. I felt myself at 10 years old again, clutching my mother's hand as we fled. I felt myself old, gray, slumped in a chair with a ribbon tied around my wrist. The house wasn't only breaking time, it was breaking me. I fell to my knees, pressing the horseshoe against the floor. The iron sizzled, burning through stone. The pain tethered me to this single moment, though the chant tried to drag me elsewhere. Above, the gears shrieked. The 13th tick grew louder. The clock was about to strike. The brass clock screamed, not a mechanical sound, an animal howl. metal shrieking like flesh torn apart. Its two hands spun in opposite directions until they snapped from the face entirely, flying across the chamber like blades. One struck the wall beside me, sinking deep into the stone. The other impaled a sleeper's chest. The sleeper didn't bleed. Instead, ribbons poured from the wound, writhing like intestines. His mouth stretched open, releasing a sound that was not his. 13th, the chant surged again, deafening. The gears above shifted violently, reversing, grinding against each other. Some began to turn in slow, impossible arcs, bending at angles no mechanism should allow. Sparks cascaded like meteors, igniting the floor where they landed. Time fractured further. I saw myself standing in the chamber and, at the same time, lying on the floor, bound in ribbons. I saw myself as a child again, screaming as my mother dragged me from Greywick. I saw myself older, gray-haired, already seated among the sleepers. Each version reached for me, mouthing my name. The iron horseshoe burned hotter than ever. I pressed it to my temple, desperate to keep myself whole. The pillar cracked open. From within, not stone, but light pale and blinding, laced with shadow-like veins. The glow pulsed in rhythm with the 13th tick. The brass clock crumbled into dust, its face shattered, numbers spilling like ash. And from the fissure in the pillar, a hand emerged, long, thin, its skin stretched tight, ribbons braided into the flesh. It clawed outward, dragging itself free. The sleepers gasped in unison, their cloudy eyes clearing for an instant. They all whispered the same word, choir. The hand was followed by an arm, a shoulder, a torso. A figure tore itself out of the stone, tall and skeletal, its body nothing but a lattice of bones bound by black cords. Its face was a hollow mask of shadow, a void deeper than the house itself. The 13th had found its body. It towered above me, taller than any human, ribs expanding with each impossible breath. Every inhale bent the chamber's walls inward. Every exhale pushed them back. The sleepers rose now, ribbons binding their wrists tighter, faces twisted in devotion. They began to sing not words, not melody, but a sound like the grinding of gears, endless and relentless. The 13th turned its void face toward me. "You are late," it whispered. The air split. Time folded over itself. I was standing before the 13th and also kneeling as a child, watching my mother scream. And also lying among the sleepers, ribbon tied, breath slowing. 3 versions of me screamed at once. The iron horseshoe glowed white-hot smoke rising from my palm. My skin blistered, but I clung to it with everything left in me. "No!" I roared, slamming it against the cracked pillar. The chamber shuddered, the gears above snapped, teeth shearing off like broken glass. The 13th staggered, ribbons unraveling, its void face splitting into a dozen mouths, all screaming in fury. The tick grew louder. 13, 13, 13, 13 filling every corner of me. The pillar split wide, stone collapsing like rotten wood. Light and shadow poured out in equal measure, flooding the chamber until the sleepers were nothing but silhouettes swaying in devotion. The 13th bellowed. Its many mouths tore open, releasing a roar that bent the gears above into molten arcs. Time shattered fully. I saw the chamber as it was. I saw it as it had been centuries ago, freshly built, the gears gleaming, the sleepers still children gathered in prayer, and I saw it as it would be ruined, collapsed, the sea crashing through broken walls, bones scattered across the stone, all 3 moments layered, overlapping, each tugging at me. My body flickered between them, torn into versions. Boy, man, corpse, the ribbons lashed, binding all 3. The girl's voice cut through. Make it wrong? The iron horseshoe throbbed like a living heart. My palm blistered, but I raised it high and smashed it against the pillar again. This time, the sound wasn't a clang, it was a scream, not from me, but from the house itself. The 13th staggered, ribbons tearing, bones shattering into splinters of shadow. Its void face cracked like glass, spilling black fire. The sleepers wailed in unison. Some collapsed, ribbons dissolving to ash. Others froze mid-breath, their bodies locked like broken dolls. Time convulsed. The chamber buckled. The gears overhead fell one by one, crashing into the floor with quakes that split the stone. Sparks rained down, burning through bodies and shadows alike. I stumbled forward, clutching the horseshoe with both hands. The pillar crumbled, the light within screaming louder than thunder. The 13th reached for me, one massive hand unraveling into cords. Its voice filled the collapsing chamber. You are mine. You are written, even broken. Time binds you. I swung the iron again, with every ounce of strength left. The pillar exploded. Light and shadow erupted outward, tearing through the chamber like a storm. The 13th shrieked, its body unraveling into ribbons that whipped away into the dark. The sleepers fell silent, collapsing like marionettes with their strings cut. The gears dissolved into dust. The 13th tick faltered and stopped. For a moment, nothing. Then silence, not the silence of the house waiting, but a hollow, empty silence, as if time itself had exhaled its last breath. I collapsed to my knees, the horseshoe glowing faintly in my hand. My vision swam. The chamber was gone. In its place stretched an endless fog, lit by no sun, held by no walls. And in the distance, faint but unmistakable, I saw a door, plain, wooden, waiting. I staggered toward it, each step heavier, each breath colder. The iron kept me anchored, but I knew I hadn't defeated the house. I had only broken its clock, and something worse might be waiting beyond that door. The plain wooden door waited at the edge of the fog like a thought I had finished. No wall held it up, no hinges bit into stone. It stood by itself, patient, the grain of its wood running like the lines in a hand that had lived too long. I reached for the knob and felt nothing. My fingers passed through as if the metal were cold smoke. When I pulled back, a print of rime lay on my skin in the shape of a ribbon. It's not a door, I said aloud, to keep my voice mine. It's an answer. The fog brightened, as if amused. I lifted the horseshoe. The iron had cooled from white to dull red, but it still pulsed faintly, faithful as a wound. I knocked once, then again, then a third time not even, not true. The same offbeat that had broken the hymn and the fees. The door shivered, the knob condensed beneath my palm, metal congealing into shape, unwilling but obedient. Somewhere behind the fog, something exhaled and counted under its breath. 1, 2, 12. It waited for the 13th the way a throat waits for a word. Make it wrong? The girl whispered, close as my ear and far as the cellar had been. Don't let it say your name. I turned the knob. Beyond lay a short passage paved in old parquet, the boards scuffed by feet that had never reached the end. On either side, thresholds opened onto rooms that weren't tea rooms, but memories rehearsing themselves. My childhood bed in Raven's Hollow with the window that stuck in winter. My mother's kitchen, its radio, always a fraction of a second ahead of the announcer. A taxi's cracked vinyl seat with ash ground into the seam. The air smelled of oranges and rain and fear. At each threshold, a voice spoke. In the kitchen, Elias, love, come eat before it's cold. My mother's voice, perfect down to the slight rasp she'd get after laughing too long. In the taxi, the driver's cough. And then, you sure. The exact cadence of the man who had asked before Greywick rose out of fog. In my old room, a voice whisper my own younger breath. Don't he look back? The horseshoe warmed against my fingers, not in warning but in recognition, as if the iron remembered them too. I wanted very much to step sideways into the kitchen and sit and be small and be told it was only a storm. That's how the house baited. Not with terror, but with the ache of an easier hour. At the end of the passage, another door stood, this one half. Through its gap drifted a wind that tasted of salt and rust. The cliff's breath, the sea's old mouth. Outside, the idea of it stung my eyes. The passage tried to count again. 1, 2, 3. Not yours, I said. I put the iron to the floor and dragged it, scoring a line across the parquet with 3 ugly scrapes. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Works rhythm. Doorback rhythm. The sound jarred. The counting loose. The air lost its place. Something laughed inside the wood. Midway down the hall, a frame I hadn't noticed tilted. The picture within blooming from fog. The ledgerman from the residence sat at a desk too small for his back. Blind sockets turned toward me. His pen moved with its immaculate stroke, and the page beneath bore my name half-finished. Elias W.A.R. The nib paused, waiting for the last letter. Don't, I said, and the iron answered for me. I rapped it against the frame 3 knocks. Wrong on purpose. The picture smudged. The pen skittered. The letter D scorched into a shape between letters. An orphan not belonging to any alphabet. Name not name. The ledgerman frowned in new confusion. A crease appearing between eyes he did not have, and the image drained away like tea spilled on blotting paper. Good, the girl breathed. Unright by miswriting. As I passed the kitchen, my mother's voice soft. If you won't eat, at least tell me where you've been. I kept my eyes forward. I gave her the courtesy of silence. Love that isn't yours anymore deserves better than to be used against you. At the taxi threshold, I lifted the horseshoe to my temple, again the iron's egg steadying end. Walked on. At the end, the half-open door waited with a patience that felt like teeth hidden in a smile. "Names," said a voice behind it. Not a whisper, not the 13th spell a voice like rope burned through a gloved hand. "You pass with a name." The ghost's whisper threaded mine. "Answer with iron." I raised the horseshoe, and instead of saying myself aloud, I knocked 1, 2, 1, 2, 3 until the wood forgot the shape of my syllables and remembered only a worker's beat. The door swung wider. Outside was cliff air and the color of morning that had decided yet whether to blue or to bruise. "Then come," the rope voice said, almost amused. "Let's see if you can leave without looking back." My mother's last command walked beside me as I stepped toward the gap. "Don't look back, Elias. Don't ever look back." "I won't," I told her. And because I still wouldn't give the house my name, I said it with my jaw and my feet instead, and the iron said it for me. I crossed the threshold. Fog took me first mouth and eyes, then lungs. I stepped onto the cliff path by feel, the door behind me neither closing nor staying. It waited. The sea's voice rose somewhere below, polite as a hymn sung in a language I didn't know. I did not turn. The path sloped away from the house's silhouette. Grass brushed my calves, wet with an old dew that never learned to dry. A goal painted a crooked arc above, then became nothing when the fog decided it did not exist today. My phone in my pocket woke like a fish under ice cream lighting, then dimming, then lighting again. A notification blinked without sound. "Welcome back." The house remembers. The same message it had sent in my first room. I thumbed it dark. I would not type replies into a mouth I couldn't see. Footsteps padded in the fog ahead. Light, careful. I froze and lifted the iron. A figure stepped into the gray. The old man from the landing, shoulders hunched, hair white as salt. His eyes were present now, pale and irritable, the way men's eyes get when their patience has been used rudely by years. "You did as badly as anyone could have asked," he said, which is another way of saying well enough. "It will knit. Houses do, but you put a seam in it where it wanted none." "The clock?" I asked. My voice sounded too loud, and I imagined the house licking the sound from the air. "The clock, the feast, the mirrors, the kept-awake systems," he said. "You taught one to limp. Limping makes a predator hungry. It makes it slower, too." He glanced at the horseshoe. "Keep it in your pocket when you sleep. Put it under your tongue when you lie." "Who are you?" I asked. He smiled without showing teeth. "Resident Emeritus," he said. "Usher. Every place like this needs one. Don't thank me. I have debts in both directions." His eyes softened, unexpectedly kind. "You're almost out. Don't get clever now." The fog shifted. Along the path, shapes appeared. Thresholds without frames, tall as men, thin as doors. Behind each, a different elsewhere. Polsta, Raven's Hollow platform with its closed ticket window. A city street at noon. A kitchen I did not own with light pooling on tile. The house offered routes like a salesman unfolds samples. Choose wrong, the usher said, and you'll arrive somewhere that still belongs to it. Choose right, and you'll get a holiday. How do I? He tapped the horseshoe with one finger. Work remembers work. Every false door is smooth. The real one will have a scar. He turned to go, then paused. If you hear your name, he said, spit iron into your palm and let your hand answer. Words are sails, houses like wind. He was gone between heartbeats, not dissolving, but concluding. I went to the first threshold ravens. The wood there was perfect, paint unchipped, glass unscarred. I pressed the iron to its jamb and felt nothing. Smooth as a lie told by a child the first time. At the city street, the iron warmed but did not breathe. The tiles of a train's roof glittered. A dog barked in a key I almost recognized. Not mine. The kitchen's threshold looked right. The sill had a nick. When I set iron to it, the horseshoe shivered once, then again. Memory crawled up my arm like heat up a flu. I drew back. The house couldn't nick a sill. It had been practicing. I closed my eyes and thought of things it could not counterfeit well. The after-rake in forearms, after splitting wood too long. The soot salt of shipyard mornings. The smell of pennies when a hand bleeds into change. Irons. Alphabet. If the door knew those letters, I would trust it. A fourth threshold appeared. Plain plank, cheap hinges, no glass to shine, no paint to promise. When I pressed the horseshoe to it, the iron answered not with heat, but with fatigue. The old honest tire that comes after a job that fought back. Okay, I said to no one, and the fog around my teeth thinned. Okay. Behind me, the house drew breath like a swimmer deciding whether to dive again. I kept my eyes on the nail heads in the plank 3 here. 2 there. One sunk too deep by a hand in a hurry. Little wrongnesses. Human wrong. I reached for the knob. Elias, the fog sang. Sweet as sugar dissolved in tea. I let the iron clink once against the plate. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. That was my no. I turned the knob and stepped through. The world tasted like rain, not yet fallen. Raven's Hollow's platform received me with a sigh of old boards. For a long second, the air held both Sense Greywick's iron breath and the station-s coal and creosote past, and then the house-s taste burned off my tongue like a liquor swallowed too fast. No one was there. The ticket window was still shut. A timetable on the wall had been updated with a pen a week ago, and then crossed out yesterday and rewritten in different ink. The realness of that laziness made my knees weak with gratitude. The horseshoe cooled to ordinary metal. I slid it into my coat pocket and left my hand there like a promise. Don't look back, I said, because I wanted to and because I wouldn't. The cliff road lay behind a veil of gray that now looked like weather, not a throat. A poster curled on the wall. All Hallows Eve charity fete. Stalls, cakes, choir. The word snagged a nerve. I tore the poster down without knowing why and folded it until it was small enough to ignore. The train arrived as if it had been waiting a respectful distance. 3 cars, paint tired, windows clean enough. I stepped aboard and took the seat I always choose in honest vehicles. Not too near a door, not in a corner that can be penned. The carriage smelled of wet wool and stories people would never tell anyone who asked outright. I breathed it like medicine. The conductor came through, hat at an angle time had earned. He punched my ticket with a click that felt like something real agreeing with itself. When he handed back the stub, his fingers brushed mine and paused. He looked at my palm where the iron had scarred lines new as a map. "Work?" he asked. "Trying to be," I said. He nodded. "Good for what ails you." We rattled along the bay. The sea outside was only a sea. Birds were only but once, in a low pocket of fog, I thought I saw a figure standing where the cliff path bent. Toward Grey-Week a girl with a ribbon, hand raised not in farewell, but in warning. The train carried me past before I could read the shape of her mouth. At the 3rd stop, the carriage filled. A woman with groceries, 2 teenagers pretending to sleep to avoid speaking. A man whose face said he did sums for a living and found them kind. Human noise took the edges off my thoughts. I let it. When the city rose, the train emptied and filled in, the way cities require, indifferent and polite. I stepped onto the platform and took escalators that did not try to count me. The light was wrong for the hour too bright, then not bright enough, but that's cities too. I did not give the house credit for every cloud. At home, the apartment door stuck the way it always had in winter and summer both. The bolt slid home with a sound I'd learned as comfort. I leaned the horseshoe on the inside knob and stood for a while in the private quiet. People built to keep weather out and welcome back in. Shower, clean clothes. Heat that came from a system whose only hunger was gas. I made tea badly and drank it like a saint. When my phone stopped vibrating, I dared to look. No messages from numbers without names. No welcome in tidy script. Only the low chaos of a life ID somehow held onto a friend asking if I wanted their spare ticket Friday. A bill. A wrong number photo of a dog's paw on a newspaper. I slept on the couch with the iron in my pocket and the ribbon on the table under a glass. In dreams, doors opened and closed without sound. In one, the girl sat on the curb outside my building, humming Nothing and Everything, nodding and unknodding a chord. I woke with my hand halfway to the knob. Morning came. Light took its time, and then arrived all at once. I made more tea better, and stood by the window that looked onto the street where the city kept its ordinary attempt. And then the building's old clock on the landing chimed noon, 1 through 12, the same way it had my first day here. I counted along because I wanted to, not because someone asked. Silence settled. I waited, foolishly, perfectly still, for the 13th. That did not come. I laughed, a sound my throat did not recognize at first. I cried into it without meaning to, and the mix of the two tasted like the sea on days when the sun decides to forgive boats. I went to the sink to rinse my cup. Behind me, the phone buzzed. I did not turn it once, I let the water run long enough to make neighbors cross. Then I wiped my hands on a towel older than my lease and picked up the phone. A new message from no number, from no one. E. I placed the iron on the screen. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. The letter ghosted, wavered, and then stopped. I set the phone face down and went to the window. Outside, the city kept its appointments. For 3 days I practiced not believing, ate badly, slept too long, answered emails with sentences that respected the clock. By the 4th, I could dress without thinking of ribbons. By the 5th, I could take the stairs without counting breaths. On the 6th, I woke just before dawn with the clear knowledge that someone was standing on the other side of my door. The horseshoe burned in my pocket, the glass over the ribbon fogged. The old wood swelled as if it remembered sea weather. E. I went to the peephole. The hallway on the other side was a cylinder of beige and exit lights, empty. Don't look back, I told myself. Ridiculous. Facing forward in a place where forward was a hallway and back was a kitchen. But the sentence was a tool now. And tools are what you keep even when the job changes. I cracked the door. Empty hall. My neighbor's mat with a joke about cats. The elevator muttering to itself about floors. Something lay on the threshold. A note, folded twice, edges curled, smelling faintly of salt and smoke. I did not pick it up. I brought the iron to it, and the metal quivered, but lightly, the way a dog's ear twitches in sleep. I slid the note into a metal mixing bowl, carried it to the sink, and ran water until the bowl brimming drowned the paper to gray pulp. When I fished it out with tongs, 3 words remained unblurred, as if written with a stubborn ink that liked to be remembered. Feasts end. Choirs don't. I dumped the pulp. I put the bowl in the dishwasher, though I knew that was for me, not for residue. That evening I walked farther than I had meant to, a habit my feet used to keep me honest. The city held, the streets turned where they were drawn to. A bus hissed. A child cried. Somebody sang badly on a balcony and was applauded by someone who needed to applaud. At the river, water fretted over pilings with the small anxiety rivers maintain regardless of human plans. Fog gathered low weather. Not throw tanned boats shouldered through without being eaten. The world performed its tricks without demanding my name. On the way back, I passed a church. Its bell sounded clean and practical. 1, 2, 3. The count of a place that needed to tell its hours to people who needed to know them. I stood and listened through 12. The 13th did not come. A dog barked. Tires splashed. A woman laughed into her scarf. I went home. At my door, a girl sat on the floor, back against the jamb, legs out in a line, as matter of fact as furniture. 10, maybe? Pale ribbon knotted at her wrist. She looked up. You made it wrong, she said. Her voice was exactly itself, not a whisper. Not the house's echo. Nothing borrowed. It won't forget. But it has to think now. Thinking slows it. I swallowed. Your name. She shook her head. It takes our names and keeps them sharp. You don't give sharp things back to the person who used them. Call me something dull. I thought of Iron's alphabet. Peg, I said. She smiled at the floor. Peg will do. Between us, on the hall tile, she placed a small, ugly thing wrapped in cloth. When I unwrapped it, a broken clapper tumbled into my palm bronze, pitted, heavy with a memory of being loud. It wanted you to be its 13, she said. It lost the habit of a clapper centuries ago. Lungs are more obedient. Keep the old habit in your house. If it calls, show it you know how bells used to behave. True and human and heavy. That hurts it. I held the clapper. It pulsed once, like a heart that had decided rest wasn't for it after all. Peg stood. We'll come by sometimes, she said, to see that you still don't answer, to remind you that wrong is a door, too. She walked down the hall. At the turn, she didn't dissolve. She left. The difference matters. Inside, I set the broken clapper next to the horseshoe on the shelf by the door. They leaned into each other like cast friends. Both past their best. Both still themselves. Night gathered. I cooked something too simple to be symbolic. I ate it because I was hungry. I made tea. The clock on the landing minded its business at the top of the hour. 1 through 12. Not because some throat demanded it, but because metal and pendulum and habit agreed. When silence came, I let it be silent. Much later, in the undertow of sleep, I heard a breath along the window. It tasted like fog and the sea and rooms underground. It shaped the first letter of my name. I rolled the clapper in my palm. I tapped it against the iron 12123 until the breath lost the word and kept only the rhythm. It went away. Morning will come again as it does in places that still remember how to spend a night. I will hang the horseshoe on a nail above the door, not as a charm, but as a job well done. I will keep the clapper where I can reach it, heavy and ordinary. I will drink bad tea better, and I will listen to bells that count what they have, not what they want. And somewhere, in a house on a cliff that once taught time to limp, something will try again to speak my name with my mouth. It can practice. I have work, and that was tonight's journey through the house beyond the fog. If you survive till the end, show your support with a like and subscribe, so we can bring you more stories that whisper from the shadows. Until next time, keep your eye close and never answer when the fog calls your name.